But I was thinking about that sense of playfulness because one of the bell hooks work that really matters to me are the children's books, because I feel like I wrote those books with much greater political intentionality in the sense of wanting to say, how do we begin to free the black girl body, the black boy body, before they have undergone years and years of emotional assault and colonization. So I was talking yesterday about Happy to be Nappy and saying, you know, little girls telling me, you say our hair feels like flower petals. And to think again about how we image ourselves, the language that we use to talk about ourselves. Audrey Rich repeats the line constantly, language is also a place of struggle. So that I think as black females seeking freedom, as women of color, we're constantly having to pay attention to language and to look at the language that we use for ourselves and the language that people use against us, because a lot of times we are vulnerable to pushing that language. I wanted to apologize, Shola. I was looking for, this is one of my sheroes, Lorraine Hansberry. And I was rereading To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, because in it she talks about a particular moment in black female body history, and she's talking about black women coming home from work, black domestics coming home from work, and she keeps using the phrase, you could be Jesus in drag, but they still think that you are selling. So that image of the black woman as prostitute, as I go around in hotels and, you know, white men are calling me on the phone saying sexual stuff, the men who stood behind me as I was checking in, I'm reminded of the fact that for so many years, black female bodies were not allowed in hotels because the assumption was that we could only be there for one reason, which is prostitution. So that thinking about the black, freeing the black body, I mean, I think part of our intellectual, academic, critical exercise is how do we free ourselves from those images to claim a different set of imaging. And I apologize, I was going to buy it and bring it, the Time magazine that has Beyonce on the cover, because one could deconstruct for days that first she's looking kind of like a deer in headlights, and she's wearing the little panty and bra set, you know, that some of us wore like when we were 10 or 12. And I'm thinking, isn't this interesting that she's being supposedly held up as one of the most important people in our nation, in the world, and yet why did they image her? I mean, she's not glam on the cover of Time magazine. What is that cover meant to say about the black female body? Did other people see that cover and were you surprised?
You know, there's a term that, that I discovered, I can't remember, in college or graduate school that is so relevant these days. It's a feminist term for media studies, and it was called symbolic annihilation. And yes, symbolic annihilation, and it is two things. It's Gay Tuchman, who wrote about it. Somebody correct me if they know. Hearth and Home, and it was a book, a compilation of essays about women's representation in the media in the 70s, in the late 70s. And symbolic annihilation is two things. It's one, not seeing yourself, but it's also seeing yourself only denigrated, victimized, etc., and what that does to you. And I think that, you know, we can talk about all the things that denigrate us, but I'd rather shift the camera, shift my gaze, and look for the images and the people and the places that feed me. And I really do think, you know, you talked about children. I really do think that the more we create our culture, all our cultural images, the books you write, the films I make, the alternatives, that these are artifacts that live, and they speak to people whether we're there or not. Bodies of work, and that is critical. So I want to just give one example. My daughter, she's 4, right? I've been working on, she's never known me not working on the Angela Davis film, which took 8 years, right? So she was so excited when I could show her the trailer. And my son was excited too, but she was particularly excited. The trailer's like 2 minutes long, and she watched that trailer over and over and over again. She had a favorite line when Angela said, "It's genocide!" I was like, that's my girl, right? She would point out all the characters. She loved going, that's Angela's mom. So she created Angela's family and a sense of community just by watching this thing over and over again. But that's not what I wanted to share. So she's a little girl, she wants to be a princess. I'm trying to convince her she wants to be a warrior princess, you know, but it's blonde and poofy and glam. She woke up one morning and her hair was all out, just like, you know, big, out, 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 out. And usually that's like, oh, Mom, my hair is too puffy, you know, it needs to. And this morning, after watching the trailer over and over and over again, she said, I have Angela Davis hair. So I thought I was making this political crime drama with a love story at the center, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I was also making another image for young people to see and to perhaps relate to. And I was blown away. Because I can tell her she's beautiful all day long. I'm her mom, doesn't count. But no, it doesn't. So the more we create the alternative universe, which then becomes the universe.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I don't write children's books, but I do in my novels, in my books, and my characters are the people who I grew up seeing every day, who I don't see, not just in literature. I don't see them on TV. I was raised by really strong women. I was raised by my great aunts and my grandmothers and my mother, and who, without fail, to a person, allowed me to chart my own path through the world, and were there to support me in that and make sure that I didn't do anything to hurt other people or that was adverse in that way. But they were there, and they weren't there in the worlds that I was inhabiting when I would go to the library and read, and they weren't there. So I decided I wanted to write them, and I wanted to write people like me who I wasn't seeing in the books either. I wanted to create these characters and put them out there, and I think what you say about self-representation and putting it out there to count as a counteract against these other images, because it's not just like the Beyonce cover, it's not just about denigration, it's also about black women are supposed to be childlike and children. They need taken care of or bossed around, and this is in the eyes of other people, you know? And so I feel like the little girl's clothing and the little girls is, let's make this very powerful woman a little girl, you know? I just saw
a little girl we can lust after.
Yes.
A little girl we can prey upon. A little girl that can be Woody Allen's daughter, taken up into the attic and sexually abused, with people witnessing from a distance but taking no action on her behalf. Because I feel like we have to draw those connections of our enslaved black female body to the enslaved black female bodies of all girls, all colors, with that predatory gaze. But it's interesting to think about, let's take the image of this super rich, very powerful black female, and let's use it in the service of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. Because she probably had very little control over that cover, that image.
I think she had control over what she wore. I know that she hires the stylist who's been with her for a long time. They've developed probably that look for that specific cover. I think she, and I would argue that she has the power now, like having worked in magazines, that she has final cut approval, and she chose this image. And so I don't want to strip Beyonce of that agency of choosing this image, of being her own manager, of all of this stuff. But
then you're saying then, though, from my deconstructive point of view, that she's colluding in the construction of herself as a slave. Are you still a slave? It's not a liberatory image.
Or she's using the same images that were used against her and us for so many years, and she's taking control over in that, saying, if y'all are going to make money off of it, so am I.
But
you know? And there is there's collusion perhaps, but there's also a bit of reclaiming, I think, if she's the one in control, right?
Well, of course, I think that's fantasy. I think it's fantasy that we can recoup the violating image and use it. I mean, like I used to get so tired of people quoting Audrey, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." But that was exactly what she meant, that you are not going to destroy this imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy by creating your own version of it, even if it serves you to make lots and lots of money. Because I really been challenging people to think about, would we be at all interested in Beyonce if she wasn't so rich? Because I don't think you can separate her class power and the wealth from people's fascination with her, that here is a young black woman who is so incredibly wealthy. And wealthy is what so many young people fantasize, dream about, sexualize, eroticize. And one could argue even more than her body. It's what that body stands for. The body of desire, fulfilled, that is wealth, fame, celebrity, all the things that so many people in our culture are lusting for, wanting. I mean, let's say if Beyonce was a homeless woman who looked the same way, or a poor down and out woman who looked the same way, would people be enchanted by her? Or is it the combination of all of those things that are at the heart of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy? And I've been saying, people of color, we are so invested in white supremacy, it's tragic. Lorraine Hansberry says that it is the only form of extremism that should discredit us in the eyes of our children, that we remain so invested. Because I think it goes back to, and Shola first brought this up, the thing about, I say to